All right. Thanks for coming today. We're going to go over the questions on the AP exam, the practice exam labeled the plus sign. I think there's 16 of them, although one of them I don't like, so I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist. That's number 58. And so here we go. All right, and again, the answer to the question is not as important as being reminded what to study. All right, you're sort of thinking to yourself, I didn't remember that at all. So therefore, I'm going to go back and study that in particular. That's what studying is reminding you what you know and what you don't know. Okay, so the first one says, these all have to do with party, elections, things like that. So when a child's parents both identify strongly with the same political party, the child will most likely, okay, remember the number one determinant of political ideology is what were your parents or your family, right? The other strong trend has to do with black voters voting for Democratic candidates. Okay, those are the two strongest trends. Those are the two ones they tend to ask about because they're so strong they're almost indisputable. Okay, so let's see. Do you tend to identify with the opposite of your parents or with your parents? Of course, with your parents. So the answer is B. But this does remind me, hey, what's political efficacy? Okay. And there's kind of two related ideas. Number one, because this is choice C. Choice C is wrong. The answer is B. But number one, there's the idea of actual political efficacy is your ability to affect politics. Okay? So we can ask questions about what are Americans, what's our political efficacy? Can we really affect policy? That's a different question than, do we think we have political efficacy? What are our feelings of political efficacy? Whether we actually have it or not. And the one that I can tell you about is the idea that Americans have an unusually high degree of feelings that they do have political efficacy, but that is declining. All right? I guess compared to other countries, maybe we feel like we have a lot of political efficacy, but that's declining. Okay? Become an independent rather than a party identifier. Although a lot of people consider themselves independent, that trend is not strong enough where we can make absolute claims about it and put it on AP tests. So, and by the way, some people that identify as independent really turn out to be Republicans or Democrats. And then become alienated from the political system. That would be somebody who had lost their political efficacy. But the answer to that one, supposed to be an easy one, is you tend to identify with what your family or your parents identify with. Whether that's ideology, so conservative or liberal, or whether that's party, Republican or Democrat. And those bonds loosen as you get older, and they loosen as you get older. So, all right, moving on. Okay, the term party machine, this is where you want to review the types of political parties. This is one of those questions I think actually, this question and number 6 are kind of challenging for being so early in the test because they just deal with kind of a political machine is a pretty well-known term, but number 6 is kind of an obscure fact. Anyway, number 3 says the term party machine. Remember, party machine. Let me think of what they are, and then I'll look at the answers. They tend to be local parties driven by the desire to win elections. They tend to have strong leadership, and there's this negative connotation to it, almost as if they're bribing their members for votes, or they're passing out patronage with political jobs and political advantage for votes so their party will gain office. There's almost this impression that the party machine is running the people who hold office from behind the scenes. Right? And they hold office because the party machine lets them, and if they decided, if they ever let the party machine down, they would be replaced. So let's see if any of those have that sort of feeling to them. Large national party organization is hierarchically structured. Maybe the hierarchy part says, hey, strong leadership, but these tend to be local. They tend to be located in Chicago, or is Tammany Hall in New York? I think it's in New York. Maybe in Chicago too. Tammany Hall is the location of a party machine from history in New York. Local party organization relies heavily on the voluntary labor of all its members. I like that it says voluntary. I don't know about I'm sorry, I like that it says local, but I don't know about voluntary. I want that idea of handing out favors to get support to be in there. Local party organization is tightly disciplined and well-staffed and relies on patronage to create party loyalty. Okay, C is very appealing to me. Party organization which political favors are distributed by national leaders in repayment for large contributions. Again, national leaders kind of steers me away from party machine. A party organization in which major platform decisions are made behind closed doors rather than at national conventions. That does have the negative connotation of party machine, but not this idea of handing out patronage. Where is that? Second, C. And I hope that's the right answer. Is that the right answer? They're all very tempting answers. That's what they think. It's an unusually hard question right there at the beginning. Okay. 4. Which of the following demographic groups has the most consistently voted for the Democratic Party in national elections over the last 3 decades? It's one of the only just trend questions they can ask you because those trends can change, right? But this one's so strong it tends not to change, and it's that African Americans vote very strongly for Democratic candidates. A good rule of thumb, it doesn't work perfectly, but a good rule of thumb is the more disenfranchised, the more the less power, the political power the group has had historically, the more likely they are to be liberal and identify with Democrats. Okay?
What chapter was the party machine?
Political parties. And you look through there and there's just some terms that I asked you to look up, but we just glossed over them. That was one of those terms. It's different types of parties. And there's parties in there like solidary groups, which are just a political party because they like getting together and hanging out and stuff like that. Okay. All right. Ooh, here's a question about the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, also known as McCain-Feingold. Now remember, a number of the provisions of this law have been struck down. So, since 2002. So you need to know what the law kind of originally said, and then know that Citizens United struck down some important parts of it. So let me give you the important parts of it. It made soft money illegal. And what is that? Soft money is the idea that if there are limits on contributions to a particular candidate in a particular campaign, if I can only give my favorite candidate, Carl Weathers, what is it now? $2,500? Maybe $2,500 for the primaries and $2,500 for the general election. I don't know the limits. They change all the time with inflation. But if I can only give him $2,500, I might say, well, I want to give another $50,000 and I can't give it directly to his campaign. What if I donate to his party? And they can't give it to him, but they can spend it on just registering voters and promoting party goals. So that might help him. That's called soft money. Hard money is donated to the candidate, to the campaign. Soft money is donated to the party. Well, this made soft money illegal. It also meant that they didn't like this idea of an interest group that can easily raise a bunch of money, like a corporation or a union or just a well-funded interest group, saying, well, we can't donate a lot of money to the candidate himself or herself. Soft money is no longer allowed, and we have all this money, and we want to influence the outcome of the election. We're an interest group. By the way, what's the special vehicle they have to use to donate their money to a campaign? There's a limit on how much they can donate, and they have to go through a political action committee, a PAC, so you want to keep that in mind. That is the way for an interest group to donate to a campaign. Okay, so interest groups with lots of money wanted to run their own ads. They said, well, I can't donate this to Carl Weathers' campaign so he can run a pro-Carl Weathers ad. And I can't give it to his party anymore. I'll just make my own pro-Carl Weathers ad. And it'll promote Carl Weathers and criticize his opponent, Rocky Balboa, and I'll be successful. All right, my interest group will influence the election. Well, the problem with that is, the problem for them was McCain-Feingold made that sort of electioneering communication, that's what it was called. It sounds like speech, though. That made electioneering communication in the 30 days before a general election, 30 days before a primary election, and 60 days before a general election outlawed, illegal. Okay. Somebody wanted to run a movie, Citizens United wanted to run a movie bashing Hillary Clinton 30 days before a primary, and they said, this is free speech. All right, the goal of McCain-Feingold is fair elections and less corruption in politics, less donations, and therefore you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. All right. The argument of people who do not like McCain-Feingold was you're restricting our speech during those windows of time. And they argued that in court. The question was, do corporations have free speech rights? And the answer the court gave was, in Citizens United v. FEC. All right, I'll write that in the board so you can see what I'm saying. The answer the court gave in Citizens United v. FEC, the 2010 case, it's such a big deal that I suspect the AP test is itching to put it on. The test makers are itching to put on the test. They sued the Federal Election Commission, in charge of the bureaucratic agency in charge of carrying out the Federal Election and Campaign Act, FECA. They sued them in 2010, and they were successful. The court decided that corporations and unions do have free speech rights, and those are protected by the First Amendment. So the McCain-Feingold Act, in a lot of ways, was unconstitutional. Okay? According to the court. That's up too high. Okay, so what's the answer? It created interest groups known as 527s. 527s are special interest groups that do not have to conform with campaign finance law in a lot of ways, but it's too complicated for really high school government class. So I doubt they're going to ask you real questions about 527. So that's the wrong answer. It made it illegal for unions to donate to presidential campaigns. No, you totally can, as long as you run through a PAC. All right. It banned soft money. That's the answer. It banned candidates from running negative advertisements. No. Most campaign spending goes to negative advertisements. And by the way, most campaign spending goes towards television and radio ads. What are they spending all that money on? Well, it's television and radio ads. Most of them, it's negative. All right. And it banned third parties from federal funding. This does remind me of an idea. Third parties can get federal funding, but they have to do really well in a previous election to get it. Do y'all remember that candidates for president get federal funding? Do y'all remember this notion? All right. They get, for the primaries, remember you got to win 2 elections to become president or senator or member of the House. That's when you have to win the primaries and you got to win the general election. Remember, the primaries are competing with members of your own party to be your party's nominee. The general election, you're competing with the other party to win the office. Okay? And for presidents, there was so much, in an attempt to limit spending in the presidential election, all right, our national government offers matching funds for presidential candidates from parties that did well enough in the previous election. It's usually only the Republicans and Democrats. All right? So you get matching funds for your primary campaign, meaning we'll meet every dollar that you raise yourself as long as you agree to limit your total spending. It's an incentive to stop spending so much. In the general election, they get full funding as long as you stay within however much money they gave you. They say, here's a big chunk of money, don't spend more than this. And so you get free money, we get limits on your spending, and I guess both sides win. Now, do the candidates have to take this? Do they have to take the limits and the free money? No. And recent candidates have been raising so much money. Barack Obama, George W. Bush have been raising so much money that they have been declining this money. Okay. But it is a thing that exists. All right? By the way, speaking of the presidential election, you're going to win 2 steps, primaries and general elections. What do you have to achieve to win the primaries? Is it a popular vote? If you're going to win the primaries, in other words, be the nominee of your party at the convention, if they're going to say, the nominee will be Carl Weathers. Come on, Carl, we're going to make a speech. What do you have to accumulate? Delegates to the convention. So the primaries are about accumulating delegates, because they go actually choose the candidates. And then the general election is also not a popular vote. What do you have to accumulate at the presidential level to win this? Electors in the Electoral College. Don't confuse the two. Don't use them interchangeably. Those are different. Right? Not equal. When you're talking about the Electoral College, call them electors. When you're talking about the the convention, call them delegates. Anyway. All right. Okay, we're on 15. Let me know if I accidentally skip one with a plus sign. Citizens who believe that their votes will have no effect on the outcome of an election. That sounds like they're not going to affect the politics. They have a low degree of political efficacy. High trust in government officials. Oh, I doubt there's a correlation there. That one seems ridiculous. High level of political participation. It seems like you would participate less if you didn't think your vote mattered. High level of political interest. I don't know if there's a correlation there. Low levels of political efficacy. That's true. Okay. And then probably high levels of cynicism. That sounds like you're very cynical if you don't think your vote matters. You might be right, by the way. But you probably should still vote anyway. Okay? The process known as front loading, okay? Can you possibly... The front loading is the idea of moving a state's elections earlier in the season. Are states allowed to move their general elections early? No, you don't want to talk about front loading when you talk about general elections. Those are required by the Constitution to be on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. There's a day for those. You can't front load the general election. That's unconstitutional. What is the election where the states get to choose the day? Primaries. And this is why, famously, in the primaries, Iowa has the first... Actually, Iowa has a caucus. Iowa goes first with their caucus. New Hampshire has the first primary. And the other states have this incentive to go early. Your incentive to go early is that's where the candidates pay extra attention. So you get extra attention from the candidates, you get extra attention from the media, and then some think you also get extra attention from the lawmakers in office, because you go early, and your outcome determines the momentum of candidates. Who are the real winners and who doesn't have a chance? And so there's incentives for states to go early, and when they do go earlier and earlier in the primary season, it's called front loading. There's also incentive to go on a day that's a big deal, like Super Tuesday, if one exists. Remember, though, these rules are made by state parties, and they could be different from the Republicans than they are for the Democrats. Okay? Most election rules are up to the states, and a lot of them are up to the particular parties within those states. All right? Anyway, let's see if we can find the answer. Presidential candidates raising funds far in advance of the first presidential primary. They do that. This is a result of front loading. You've got to start campaigning and raising money earlier because the real important states go so early now. But this is not a definition of front loading. A presidential candidate seeking endorsements before officially declaring candidacy. That's not front loading. The tendency of states to choose an early date in the primary calendar. That sounds very much like a great definition of front loading. So let's see. But let's read these others. Political action committees contributing money to candidates at least 1 year before the first presidential primary or caucus. No, I don't even know if that's a thing they do. By the way, if a political action committee has a choice, who do they tend to give their money to? What? Yeah, you might say, well, somebody who agrees with them. Yeah, that's all great, but they really want to influence a winner because that person will take office. So they tend to donate to the person most likely to win. That's one of the reasons you want to establish, I'm a winner. I won the Iowa caucus. I got second in the New Hampshire primary. Because then the money might keep rolling in or start rolling in more because you've established, I might win this thing. And PACs want to donate to a winner. So do individual donors. And you don't want to donate to a loser because you donate to somebody who didn't win. The winner-take-all principle of the Electoral College. The winner-take-all principle is a characteristic of the Electoral College, but it is not front-loading. So let's remind ourselves what that is. That means in 48 of the 50 states, the candidate that wins the majority of the popular votes gets all the Electoral College votes. Okay? And so that needs no further explanation. All right. By the way, do those states have to be winner-take-all? Well, that's a state choice. That's a state decision. But they choose to be winner-take-all because that makes your state have higher stakes. Winning your state gets you all the Electoral College votes, gets a candidate all the Electoral College votes. Losing your state costs them all the Electoral College votes, so it makes your state more important. All right? But now that all the states do it, none is more important, so it's almost as if you weren't winner-take-all, your state would be less important. You don't want that either. All right, other ways to be important in the Electoral College are to have a lot of Electoral College votes, Texas is not all that important lately because we're not a swing state. You know, the real way is to be a swing state. It could go either way. Although maybe Texas will become a swing state soon because of our changing demographics. All right, 23. Which of the following is a type of primary election that requires registration as a party affiliate to vote? All right. Remember, the rules about the primaries are up to the states. Even having a primary election is up to the states. So let's go through the different types. We have open, where anybody can go vote in that primary. Okay, it's open to everybody. Closed, where you have to be a registered party member to go vote in that primary. All right? And you have some weirdo mixed systems, like Texas is actually closed, but it's virtually open. But either way, I think this is a closed primary, right? Okay. You also have the blanket primary that covers everything. In other words, where you can go vote for both Democrats and Republicans at the same time. All right, which is a little, it's rare, but it's a thing. It covers both parties, like a blanket. Right. And then plebiscite is not it's a word, but it doesn't really apply here. In general primary, no, there's the general election, and that's not the same thing as primary election. All right. An election in which there is, we're on number 33, an election in which there's a significant shift in the bases of electoral support from one political party to another. So this is a really important election where there's some kind of important shift. The basis of electoral support, either one party that used to be dominant gets overcome by the other party and the new party becomes dominant, or maybe the set of issues that determine the outcomes of the elections changes. Maybe the dominant party doesn't change, but the set of issues that are important changes. All right? And there's actually two names for this. Okay, let's see what it says. The two names are critical election and realignment election. Critical means important. Realignment means there's a shift. Okay, so deviating election, no. Maintaining election, no. De-aligning election, man, that's tempting, but it's actually realigning election. In a primary election, of course, not the case. And then let me give you some quick critical elections to know. Okay? Critical elections to know. And some people put, I think, the 1828 election on here because that's when the modern political party was sort of asserted itself under the Jacksonian Democrats. It's when the Democrats became the Democratic Party as a significant party. So you might say in 1828, it's almost like the modern political party was invented in America, and it was when the Democrats became a dominant party. Okay, so you could put 1828. All right. You could also say 1860 because that's when, under the leadership of Lincoln, the Republicans became a major party. That's an important shift. Those became the dominant party, and that ran until all the way through Reconstruction, all the way till 1932, when the Democrats, under the leadership of, this is an important guy to know, president in the early 30s, beginning of World War II. Under the leadership of FDR, so this is Lincoln. This is FDR. Became the dominant party. That doesn't mean they won every presidency. In fact, there was a pretty good mix of presidents. All right? That just means they tended to control Congress. That doesn't mean they controlled every seat in Congress or both chambers all the time. That means the trend was they controlled more seats than the Republicans. And that lasted until 1994, when there was some disillusionment with government. Our deficit was soaring, or we thought it was soaring. We didn't know that was actually a pretty good deficit. The incumbency advantage weakened, so all these Democrats that had won election after election after election, their incumbency advantage weakened, and in 1994 the Republicans took both chambers of Congress, and that was part of the devolution movement. They promised we're going to give more power back to the states by reforming welfare, okay, and changing categorical grants to block grants. So the Republicans. Now this is not a presidential election year. It wasn't like the current president was Bill Clinton. It wasn't like Bill Clinton led the Republicans, all right? And then This ended in 2006, but I would not say 2006 is a critical realignment election because it didn't last. The shift back to Democratic power didn't last. Okay, and if in case there's no questions about it, when we get to the end, we'll make sure we discuss some brief examples and reasons for the incumbency advantage. All right, let's move forward. All right, which of the following describes the result in a winner-take-all single-member district plurality system? Which is what we have. Plurality means the most votes wins. You don't actually have to have a true 50% plus one majority. A little confusing because when we have two parties, frequently a plurality is a majority, but you need to know the difference. The plurality is when, all right, even if you only have 30% of the votes and you don't have a real majority, if nobody else has more than you, you win. If everybody else has 25% of the votes, you win. A majority means you have to actually have the majority. You have to have 50% plus one. That'd be a simple majority. So we have a plurality system. Okay. Winner take all means in the electoral college you get all the electors if you're running for president. And as far as Congress goes, we have single member districts, meaning our districts only have one person representing them. Right? There are some places around the world where they draw a district, and there would be 5 people representing that district, and they sort of proportionally dole out the spots to different parties. They say the Bull Moose Party, you guys got 20% of the vote, so you get one of the seats. The Republican Party, you guys got 40% of the vote, you get 2 of the seats. The Democratic Party, you guys got 40% of the vote, you get the other 2 seats. That would be a multiple member district system with proportional representation. But we have single member districts, so the winner, the party that wins that district gets the whole district, right? We don't divide it up in any way. And the result, the consequence of that is our two-party system. All right? There's something called Duverger's law that you don't have to know for this class. It says when you have these conditions in place, you're very likely to have very few parties, usually 2. All right? Okay, the candidate who receives the most votes wins the election. That is plurality. That's the right answer. Unless I go to the bottom and there's like all of the above or something. The candidate who receives at least 51% of the votes wins. Now that would be a majority. The top 2 vote getters compete in a runoff. We don't have to have a runoff if there's a plurality. We just say who has the most, they win. When do you have to have a runoff? If you've got a majority system and nobody gets a majority. Then those systems have runoffs. That's one of the reasons we have 2 parties, is because if we had runoffs, if we had a majority system where we could run off, we might have a bunch of people run, and then we say, well, nobody got a majority. So candidate A and candidate B both got the most votes, so let's have them have a runoff. And then everybody could make alliances behind those 2 candidates. And you have a chance. Those multiple, more than 2 people running for office, multiple parties have a chance. And then they can, if they don't win, they can make alliances. We have to make our alliances before the election starts. So our parties end up being alliances of lots of different particular interests. We only get one shot at the elections. You can call these a one-shot election system. All right. Sometimes they also call this first past the post. All right, meaning the party that takes the plurality gets the whole seat, not a part of the seat. Anyway, the top 2 vote getters compete in runoff. No, a political party must receive 51% of the votes to win all the seats in the district. No, we only have 1 seat in every district. And the party that receives the most votes in the election wins the seat and selects the party member who filled the seat. Some people do that. It's called a list system, where you don't vote for candidate, you vote for parties, and then the party fills the seat with a human. We have candidate-centered elections. That's really important, because our campaigns then are about the person. They're about, I am a good guy. Here is my background. Here is my family. All right? Our media coverage of elections focuses on the individual, not the party. Some countries, especially countries that have this system where you vote for a party and not an individual, all right, vote for a party, and so their campaigns center around promotion of a party. Right? But ours is special in these ways. Do you think the camera caught me spitting on the floor? I didn't mean to. I said party one too many times. All right. The 3 points of an iron triangle include, remember this, an iron triangle is a theoretical conception of how government actually works, and because the idea is really the people who make the laws are not the people who have the most influence over laws are not all the whole floor of the Senate and the whole floor of the House. Those people must vote on the laws, but the actual legislating is done in committee. So you have your committee in Congress, and carrying out the laws, the president doesn't really do that himself. Actually, agencies in the bureaucracy do that. So whatever agency in the bureaucracy deals with that area of law will actually carry out the law. And then most people don't have any particular interest in a policy area. If the policy area is education, there are a lot of people who don't really care that much about it, or if they do, they don't really pay attention to it and they're not involved in it. The people that actually are involved are in those particular interest groups, in education interest groups. Those are parents groups or teachers unions. If you need an example of an interest group, by the way, use a union or use a corporation. Those are easy, right? Easy to think of. It's hard to think of issue groups. All right, anyway, so this is how policy actually is made and gets enacted in real life. This is at least a theoretical description of it. So there's the 3 points: committee in Congress, agency in the bureaucracy, interest groups. And they revolve around some policy area. Okay? Then we have a related idea that says, but really, modern lawmaking involves multiple policy areas, sometimes all at the same time. So sometimes you'll have transportation, let's say, in its iron triangle interacting with this iron triangle, and you get an issue network, right? So this would be called an issue. And there might be multiple more policy areas involved in this issue network. There you go. So I guess we have to look for the right answer. An independent agency, a state, no, that's not right. Administrative agency, remember, administrative is code word for bureaucracy, for executive branch. Administrative agency, an interstate interest group, and a congressional committee, B. Okay? A cabinet department, an interest group in the House, no. A regulatory commission, no. Corporation, the White House office, no. An executive office of the president, an interest group, the Senate committee, no. Okay, it's B. Oh, God. Holy cow. All right, I read this question. I see it says a major difference between political parties and interest groups. Okay? And so let me think of what the answer might be before I read through these long answers. Political parties, the main thing they do is try to get candidates elected to office, right? Interest groups, they might be involved in that, but they have some sort of special interest that they care a lot about. Agreed? So they might try to push their interest by influencing elections, but they might also do so by appearing in the media or grassroots efforts. Remember, grassroots means people interacting with each other at the popular level as opposed to the government level. Okay. Anyway, let's look and see if we can find something good. Interest groups typically shift their position on issues over time. No, that's why they're an interest group. The issue is important to them. Parties change their views over time. Why? To help them win elections. All right? Well, this one's not right. Interest groups usually recruit candidates for office, while political parties usually limit themselves to making campaign contributions to candidates. That is not true. Parties recruit candidates. Why? So they can get them elected to office, so they can socialize them, so they can get them ready to run. Political parties seek to gain control of government, while interest groups seek to influence policy. That's very tempting. This means winning office. This means pursuing some sort of policy goal, some sort of interest. Okay? That's very tempting. Let me see if there's a better answer. Political parties tend to have narrow coalitions of support. Interest groups tend to have broad coalitions of support. Nope. Political parties usually focus on one issue, while interest groups focus on mainly on many issues. Though parties do have a sort of a listing of their views on issues, their ideology. What do you call that? Platform, right? Okay? And it usually involves multiple issues. All right? Everything from education to foreign affairs to civil liberties to lots of issues on the party platform. Interest groups often have one thing that they care about: gun rights, the environment, things like that. Abortion. Making money if you're a corporation. Labor laws if you're a union. A referendum can best be described as a vote to, we talked about this special type of election yesterday, that's where the people can vote to reject a politician and take them out of office. So it's not choose party nominees, it is not choose a candidate, no single candidate has a majority after the initial election, because we don't have to do that, because we don't use majority elections, we use plurality elections. Determine whether citizens support an action by their state legislature. Ooh, That is right. I was wrong a second ago. I described a second ago a recall, didn't I? That's where you can vote to reject the candidate and take them out of office. You recall them out of office. Yeah, a referendum is where you refer. The word refer is in there. You refer an issue to the people. We don't do this at the national level. That's why it says state legislatures. California does it famously. Remove elected officials from office. That's a recall. I'm sorry. And then, so the answer is C, and it's not confirmed political appointees. That was a test, and you all failed. All right. Which of the following most accurately describes media coverage of elections? Okay. This is going to be a question about how our media tends to focus on the person, not the party. They tend to focus on who's ahead and who's behind, what the strategy should be, what the momentum is like, as opposed to what are the candidates' views on issues, right? And let's see what we. Oh, and they tend to not give the candidates very much time to talk because they usually involve sound bites. Okay, so let's say it's typically superficial in nature coverage of elections. Coverage of presidential primaries gives relatively equal power to states regardless of when they hold their primaries. Nope. Who does the media focus on? Frontloaders, the early states. Coverage tends to focus on issues, no, rather than on which candidate is ahead in public polls. It's exactly the opposite. They focus on the horse race aspect. Who's ahead, who's behind. Reporters who use secret sources in their campaign coverage are shielded by federal law from having to reveal those sources. I don't think that's true, but that doesn't have anything to do with elections. Radio and television stations, now reporters are careful not to reveal their sources, but there's no federal law protecting them, I don't think. Radio and television stations must provide on their news broadcasts equal time for and equal coverage of major party candidates. There are equal time and right of reply rules for major party candidates. If you criticize me on TV, I get a chance to respond. If you're going to give my opponent 20 minutes to talk, you got to give me a chance to also have 20 minutes. That's a very tempting answer. Let me see what he says. Network news coverage is usually dominated by reporters who offer relatively short sound bites from the candidates. So, I'm going to have to choose between D and E because both D and E look very tempting. So network news coverage is usually dominated by reporters who offer relatively short sound bites from the candidates. I know E is true, right? Now I'm starting to doubt my stance on D. Radio and television stations must provide on their news broadcasts equal time for and equal coverage of major party candidates. I guess the idea it's major party candidates makes this wrong. But I know E is right, so I'm going to reject D and put E. Alright, so I'm going to defer to the classic teacher strategy of saying, oh yeah, well that's not the best answer. Although I really like D too, but I know E is true for sure. Okay. And I hope that's what the answer is.
That is the answer.
Yeah. All right. I guess by tomorrow I'll try to figure out what's wrong with D. All right. When none of the presidential candidates receives a majority of the votes in the Electoral College, this is a rare instance, because in a two-party system that would have to be an exact tie. But it does reference an unusual fact. Almost all of our elections at the national level are plurality elections. There is one that requires a clear majority, and that's the Electoral College vote for president. And if there's no clear majority, what happens? Well, if there's two candidates running against each other, somebody's probably going to have a majority. They're either going to get 51% and the other guy 49 or worse, or they're going to get 49 and the other guy's going to get 51 or worse. All right? So you have to be an exact tie. And that's possible with 538 Electoral College votes. But if that happens, or if multiple parties ran, this could happen a lot. You could have a situation where there's 10 candidates and none of them have 50% or more. Right? So where does it go? Who chooses the winner? It goes to the House only, and each state gets one vote in that decision. So even though Texas has, what do we have, 36 representatives in the House, they all get to decide on one vote for president. And even though, and it's actually the top 3 candidates, by the way. We only have 2 run at a time, but the framers didn't necessarily anticipate a two-party system. Yeah, that's a star. 53. Split ticket voting. All right. Used to be a lot of people would vote based on party, so they would vote the straight ticket, meaning They would either check the box that says vote for all Republicans or vote for all Democrats, or they would literally go through and check all the Republicans and vote the Republican straight ticket or the Democratic straight ticket. Split tickets where you don't do that, where you vote for some Republicans and some Democrats. I hope that's an answer. Starting to doubt myself now. Turning in a spoiled or mutilated ballot as a form of protest. I've never thought about protesting that way. Like, how would you spoil your ballot so somebody notices?
Yeah, I was just asking you. Do you like tear it up and then throw it at the proctor?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I use the mint they give me to like draw bad words on it or something. I don't know. Using separate ballots for candidates at the state and national level, that's not true. Voting Republican in one election cycle and Democrat in the next, that's almost true, but a split ticket is where you split the same election ballot. Ticket means ballot. Voting for candidates for different parties on the same ballot, that's the answer. D, voting for one party in the primary and another party in the general election. That's possible. That can be called strategic voting, where you go vote to hurt your opponent in their own primaries. All right, two more, but we're not actually going to do 58. When contributing to congressional campaigns, political action committees want to contribute to the winners. All right? Oh, crap. Winners is not one of the answers. Who's probably going to win? In Congress. Doesn't really apply as much in the presidency, but in Congress, what's the best person to bet on? What's the best trend of the winner? Like to know the winner. What? Incumbents. Incumbents almost always win. All right? It's stronger in the House. Roughly 90% of incumbents tend to win in the House. It's a little bit weaker, but it's certainly not weak. It's still 70 to 80% of incumbents in the Senate win. It's weaker for the president, although it still exists. Why is there an incumbency advantage? You need to go look all those things up. All right, I'm going to think of ones off the top of my head right now, but go look up why is there an incumbency advantage in Congress, and then also why is the House one stronger than the Senate one? So why does incumbency advantage exist? Because incumbents have name recognition. They might get more media attention. They get to send free mail. It's called the franking privilege. They get to promote themselves. Almost done. They get to promote themselves by attaching their names to a bill, a law, an investigation. They get to a fundraising advantage, like this says, they get a fundraising advantage because they're likely to win, so they're likely to get more donations, which makes them more likely to win. And incumbent presidents get a free airplane to fly them around. And then why does the House have a stronger incumbency advantage? Well, it's actually the Senate is a little bit weaker because they face stronger challengers because it's a more prestigious job. They have to appeal to a bigger constituency because they serve a whole state instead of just a district. And they tend to be, they have 6 years, so maybe that's 6 years to gain name recognition, but it's also 6 years to mess up, to do something controversial or to say something controversial. All right. We're not going to do 58 because I disagree with the answer to 58. I think when you remove education and class statistics from voting tendencies, the races are roughly equal. 58. The answer to 58 thinks that the black people end up voting more when you remove those factors. That may be true, but I've never heard that outside of just this test.